Hello and welcome back to the Lowdown, everybody, where today we are picking one January signing to save your club from relegation. Coming up, which Chelsea player should Leicester sign on loan?
Someone who can fill in multiple positions, someone who's tactically astute, just a really good footballer.
The out-of-favour Liverpool player that Wolves should bring in. He's got an opportunity to go get game time. Yes, it's a difficult situation, but there'll be certainly plenty of defending for him to improve his skills on. And the player who could save Southampton's season.
Just the energy that he would offer Southampton in midfield would be invaluable.
Hello guys and welcome back to the Lowdown. Merry Christmas as well. Happy Christmas week. And joining myself and Mikey today, we've got El Sporting Director. He is returned once again. How are you doing, Pete?
Yeah, very good, very good. Yep. So I've had some fun with Man United and Liverpool. What have you got for me this week?
It is a tougher task. We are giving one January signing to save your club from relegation. We are looking at the bottom 4 teams as we record this. We should note as well, because this video is currently going out on Christmas week, we are off as this video goes out, but there's been one set of fixtures since we record this. So things wouldn't have changed too much. And quite frankly, whether the position of these sides has changed slightly, they could all do with one successful January signing, I think.
They all need my help.
They all need your help. They do.
It's like Michael Emenalo in the Saudi Arabia Pro League, isn't it? He's sporting director for the entire league.
Yes.
Is that what we're moving towards?
I think that's what we're going to, yeah.
Maybe
Pete,
when the European Super League launches, I could be the one to
ultimate
step in.
Control. I mean, you've done such a good job with Man United and Liverpool that I think you will be given a call.
Sort out the draft.
Exactly. But we're going to kick off with Leicester City, who are 17th as it stands. Mikey, do you want to kick off with your Leicester City suggestion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a tough one. I think this is a tough task for all of us here, both the chief scouts and the sporting director, because it does feel like the Premier League this season in particular, I guess you could argue last season as well, that especially the newly promoted sides, it feels like the squad building or the options, the depth in those squads is really stark compared to the rest of the league. It really feels like now in the Premier League there's almost like a top 13 and a bottom 6, or a top 14 and a bottom 6, top 15 and a bottom 5. It really feels like the quality there is really, really stark, or the gap in quality is really, really stark. Where you have the middle of the league so strong, and now the relegation sides. There's just so much work to do here, and I think this is particularly true of Leicester, who have of course been limited by PSR issues over the last 12 months. And so I think there's a number of areas here. Like, I was pretty keen to try and locate a centre-back for Leicester, but I really struggled in that area. And I feel like for that reason, I went a bit further forward. Fatahu's injury, he was such a huge player for them in the Championship last year. His injury on the right wing, it is massive for them, and it feels like under Ruud Van Nistelrooy they are going to be, focusing on the attack. I don't know how much Van Nistelrooy is going to be able to shore them up. It feels like they may become a more attacking proposition than they were under Steve Cooper, which is risky business when you're fighting relegation. But given Van Nistelrooy's CV, managing PSV, managing, being the assistant manager of Man United, it feels like that's where his instincts lie. So I've gone for someone who can aid the attack as well as fill in midfield as well in a more defensive capacity. Because I think, Buonanotte has, been a real shining light for them. El Khanous as well has looked pretty bright at points since coming into the side as well. So they do have cover there. But I think if you could have someone who can fill in at number 10, can also fill in midfield, it takes the pressure off those guys a little bit. They are still so young. And of course, Jamie Vardy, I just trust him and Patson Daka to be able to hold it down up front. So I've actually gone for someone, also given PSR constraints and the fact that it looks like they're going to cancel Edouard's loan up top to make space for a new loan signing. I'm going for a loan signing here.
Okay.
And I'm going very, very safe. I'm going for someone who is not getting any game time where he is right now. Someone who's very, very familiar with the squad. It's Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall getting back in.
Wow.
I just think that familiarity will be invaluable, I think, to Leicester. in the second half of the season. You know, him and Vardy, of course, have a great relationship. You know, Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, you know, linking up so well with him last season, having been moved into a more advanced role by Enzo Maresca. So it solves that issue a little bit going forward, that kind of lack of creativity that they currently have. I think he'll be invaluable in that sense. But also, you know, Leicester do need a bit more control in midfield. You know, Harry Winks and Wilfred and Ndidi, as good as they were in the Championship last year, you know, the Premier League is a big step up, and Ndidi's almost had to become more of a ball progressor over the last 2 years, and I kind of feel like he needs to just be fully focusing on being a ball winner at this moment in time. And I feel like someone like Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall coming into that midfield, you know, if needed, can provide that ball progression, can provide that control. He was also a bit of a ball winner himself, Dewsbury-Hall, like in that season that they got relegated as well. So, you know, just someone who can fill in multiple positions, someone who's tactically astute, just a really good footballer, and someone who is clearly adept at Premier League level as well. So yeah, a bit of a boring first suggestion, but it just feels like a no-brainer. Like, he's not getting any game time at Chelsea. Like a short-term loan is not going, you know, for him to get game time is not, you know, it can't go wrong for him really. And also it puts him in the shop window for anyone who might want to, you know, maybe a mid-table Premier League club who might want to come in for him come the summer. Because yeah, there's just, it doesn't seem to be any use for him just rotting on the bench at Chelsea right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, playing in Kazakhstan is probably not what he dreamed of when he signed for Chelsea, was it? I think that's pretty much all he's getting at the moment, isn't it? The Conference League. I think you've got to remember that relationship with Maresca, though, that Dewsbury-Hall's got there. So I think that's quite an important aspect of, you know, whenever you consider his future, he's talking about him being put in the shop window, potentially sold next summer. I'd be quite surprised, given that relationship he's got with Maresca, how important he was to him last year, how good he was for him in the Championship. I think Maresca would be willing to give him time. And yes, he's not giving him time in the Premier League at the moment, but as part of that Conference League squad, I think it's working really well for Chelsea and Maresca at the moment, having that balance. And I made this point the other day, was a big problem for Spurs last year was they didn't have any European football. So when they got to the crunch point of the season, the real busy point of the season, they had a load of these fringe players who'd hardly kicked a ball, having to come in and cover for these injured players, and they just weren't up to speed and they weren't able to deal with it. You think about that Chelsea game when they got a couple of players sent off and an injury out of that game as well. So whereas Chelsea, I think, are really well placed. So if there was an injury to someone in their midfield, then I think someone like Dewsbury-Hall would be up to speed and could come in. So I think he might just be tempted, and I think this is what Maresca would probably tell him, is, look, stick around. You might get your chance in the second half of the season, and just be ready for when you need it.
It is a big if, though, isn't it? Because I just feel like, you know, if there is that injury doesn't come, then it's like he's never going to get into the team over Cole Palmer, is he?
No. Oh, of course.
So, like,
not.
I think, I don't know. Yeah, I do see where you're coming from, and I think from a Chelsea perspective, it's good. Yeah, like you say, I think it's good to have him around. But I just feel like from the player's perspective, you know, I would be getting slightly itchy feet if I was him.
Yeah, I know what you meant, because he was such a central part for Leicester, wasn't he, last year? He was the hero for Leicester last year, getting towards the title. And, you know, the new year brings you the FA Cup as well, so that's further game time for him. Yeah, interesting shout. I mean, I'm so loved at Leicester. They'd have him back with open arms, wouldn't they? Certainly.
I thought I was in real trouble, but the sporting director feels like the
I was a bit.
The door is ajar.
Yeah, sorry, Mikey. A bit cool on your end.
No, I like it. I like it.
If you don't get it from here, you've missed it.
Well, we'll see. Don't ramp up the pressure too much. I mean, I actually looked at the other end of the pitch, because I do think they've got enough firepower, Leicester. I know it's not necessarily clicked in every game, but I do think they've got enough firepower to make a real fist of surviving. But I do really worry about their centre-backs in terms of the lack of pace they've got in that squad. Now, Akoli's out. You know, Cody, Vestergaard, Wout Faes, they're not necessarily poor players, but they're all very slow.
Yeah.
Like Cody, they created a system at Wolves for him where his distribution was the main area. He had two centre-backs either side of him. He's just not quick. He's just really not quick. Yeah. It's been a real downside in his game. Look, he's achieved amazing things. He's been in England squads for major tournaments, but he's just not quick, and that's not going to change now. So I looked for a player that can play at centre-back. Yeah, actually, the player I'm going to suggest can also play in midfield. He can even play as a number 10, which could be quite handy in certain games as well. And it's Hoffenheim's Anton Stack. Now, he won't be necessarily that familiar to a lot of Premier League audience, but he's playing at Hoffenheim right now. Hoffenheim are having a really difficult season. As we record this, they are 4 points clear of the relegation playoff zone. They lost Max Bayer in the summer, joined Dortmund, and he was their main sort of threat last year, along with Andrej Kramaric, who's a former Leicester player who has turned into this ultimate Bundesliga kind of cult hero. He's been so consistent there. But Stack is normally a defensive midfielder, but this year he's been playing as a centre-back, and his numbers are really impressive. So he's got around an 84% pass accuracy. That's pretty solid for a centre-back, but only 4 players at Leicester have created more chances than him, despite the fact he's playing as a centre-back. His progressive passes would be the most at Leicester. He's completed 63, and he does 4.2 defensive actions per 90 and wins 72% of his tackles. And only Okoli, who's now out, is above 67% in Leicester's squad. And none of their other centre-backs, Vestergaard, Cody and Wout Faes, are over 50%. So this is a guy that wins his challenges, which I just feel is so crucial for Leicester. Sometimes I feel like they're almost in every single game, but there's just 1 or 2 basic errors at the back, or there's something that slightly goes awry and someone misses a duel, and then it creates a sort of succession of mistakes that lead to goals. You know, if you make 3 mistakes in the same series of play in a Premier League game, like, you're conceding, and it feels like Leicester do that far too often. And the Ruud Van Nistelrooy appointment, I think, is really interesting, because obviously his managerial experiences with PSV, one of the best sides in the Eredivisie, when he had Xavi Simons, he had Madueke, he had Cody Gakpo for half of his season. He is used to creating and trying to create attacking opportunities with the side. Like, he was recently in charge of Man United, who obviously are not having a good season, but he is not used to shoring up a backline. Whereas some like Anton Stack, who can play in midfield, who can play at the back, I think could make a big difference for them going forward, and is not the sort of character that's going to think that Leicester is such a big step down from Hoffenheim. Whereas if I was Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, to go back to Leicester after 6 months, that feels just quite demoralising from a mental perspective, I imagine. Whereas Stack, I think, would be like, 6 months at Leicester, impressed there, stay in the Premier League, head back to Germany, whatever he wants to do. So this is a permanent signing. He's valued at around 15 million euros by Transfermarkt, which is not always that reliable for valuations, but they tend to go a tiny bit too low. But I think if you offered 15-20 million pounds when he's valued at 15 million euros, I think there's a very decent chance that Hoffenheim accept.
Well, I've not seen as much of him as I have of Dewsbury-Hall. I think that's pretty obvious and fair to say. But I mean, from the way you've sold him, but I do agree. I think that central defensive setup there just isn't strong enough for Leicester, I don't think, in this Premier League. Vestergaard, I've not been convinced about for quite a while. As you say, Cody getting on. I think the keeper's excellent, but I think he's excellent because he has to make so many saves regularly for Leicester in so many games. So yeah, I would be leaning towards bolstering that defence with Stack, Mikey. I'm sorry, but the dream reunion with Dewsbury-Hall.
It's over.
Not for now.
I'll try again next summer.
To hopefully stack up the defence in front of Hermansen.
Nice.
Right, let's move on to Ipswich. Mikey, you lost that round. Why don't you go next?
Okay, so Ipswich, I feel like I've got maybe a slightly more enticing option here. Good. I think Ipswich...
You need to improve your
strike
rate. Savage from our sporting director.
Yeah. A bit more imaginative as well, and I just think with Ipswich there's just a bit more. There's a few more possibilities here. I think Ipswich, financially are in a better place than Leicester, most certainly. So much investment over the summer, and some of it, has paid off really well. Liam Delap, of course, has really been the jewel in their crown this season. But despite that, they're still, we still rank second bottom of the league for expected goals.
Yeah.
Everton, at the time of recording, are the only team below Ipswich in this metric, and Everton actually played one game fewer due to the Merseyside derby being called off. So, I feel like someone like Liam Delap is papering over the cracks a little bit. Of course, we know he's got a 25-yard screamer in him, but that is papering over the cracks. Leif Davis is the only real creator in that team. Of course, you've got Omari Hutchinson, who has looked pretty good. He very much looks like a Premier League level player now, but creativity isn't, it's not his forte. He's a bit more of an all-rounder. He's a goal threat. He's a bit of a maverick, but I do feel like that Ipswich, especially following the injury to Ogbene, who's out for the season now, they need someone a little bit like Leicester, actually, someone on the right-hand side, because at the moment it's just Wes Burns, and I don't really think that Wes Burns long-term is a Premier League level forward. So Leif Davis is creating 2.3 chances per 90 minutes. That's actually up there with the best in Europe in terms of total chances created. I think he's in the top 15, top 20 players in Europe's top 5 leagues. But then after him, Hutchinson is creating 1 chance a game. Delap himself is creating 1.1 chances a game. And then that's about it in terms of their regular starters, players who are actually creating over a chance a game. So they desperately need more creativity going forward. I think in terms of their defensive structure, I think they made just about enough investment in the summer, and I think their central midfield can just about hold it together as well. I think even though I think quality-wise that they need to upgrade in central midfield, I think in terms of depth they're just about okay, which I think is something that you could probably say for Leicester too. But they need someone who can really fill in on that right and can also help out creatively centrally as well, because we've seen Amari Hutchinson's move out to the right as well at points, seen him play on the left too. But of course you've got Jack Clark there as well. You've got Smodix, who's played a lot of minutes on the left too. So I've gone for someone who his best football in the Premier League was on the right wing. It was a few years ago now. He's come back from injury this season. It's Emi Buendia at Aston Villa. Now, this is another
to East Anglia as well. Familiar to East Anglia.
Familiar to East Anglia. I mean, I didn't take that into account. A move to Ipswich would be deeply unpopular with the Norwich fans. Yeah. And there's also the possibility of Leeds coming in for him in January. I know they were keen on him in the summer as well, and he'd be linking back up with Daniel Farke. So yeah, Emi Buendia to Ipswich would be a controversial move for sure. And maybe that will come into your thinking, but I think in terms of as a fit, I think he would work incredibly well under Kieran McKenna. In that 2019-20 season, when Norwich finished bottom of the league, he was putting up around 3 chances a game. He was putting up around 7 progressive passes a game. He was also making, I think, over 3 tackles and interceptions a game. He is just such a tenacious attacker on his day. And I think he would actually be getting game time this season at Villa. Of course, had that, last season completely wiped out by injury. But before that injury, he was, by everyone who was following Villa's pre-season for the 2023-24 season, he looked like Villa's best player. And this season, Unai Emery has said that if it wasn't for the form of Morgan Rogers and John McGinn, that he would be getting more game time, but as it stands, he's just not getting any game time whatsoever. He's just getting a few minutes here and there off the bench. So similarly to Dewsbury-Hall, this is a player who I think he's getting really itchy feet right now. And I think he's a new club, and he's well adjusted to, he's well used to relegation dogfights. He's also well used to, if Ipswich go down, to being part of a promotion push, because I think that Ipswich squad is very, very well placed to come straight back up.
Norwich game next year is going to
be could you imagine? But maybe that's what it needs. We need a public enemy in Norwich, and I think Buendia is. Buendia can take it.
He's the mustard out. It's going to be
yeah. I think Buendia has got the mental strength to be able to take that. So yeah, I just think he's a really good fit. I must admit, I didn't quite take into account the East Anglia derby there, and how that could come into his decision making. But yeah, I think that would be great. Add a little bit of spice to it, and yeah, I just think he's a really good fit there.
Our sporting director, any initial thoughts?
I was just trying to think of a wrong side of the tractor derby sort of pun, but I'm not quite sure it works. But no, look, as a player, I think it's all going down the right path. And you mentioned about him being good on the right wing. I actually think, coming into number 10, playing that sort of central role behind the striker, behind Delap, I think he'd be excellent. Love watching him, sort of the way he can sort of thread passes through, carry the ball as well. I think Chaplin there as the number 10, maybe not quite doing it, or maybe not quite up to that level. But look, with Ipswich, you have to take into account they've come up very quickly through the leagues, haven't they? And a lot of this, this squad have played at different levels for them. So I think you have to be not too harsh on maybe the quality or the way that some of those players are performing in the Premier League at the moment. It's a really good story still, the Kieran McKenna story and the Ipswich story together. So I'd say don't be too harsh on them. As a profile of player, I think it's a really good shout. As a actual characteristics of a player, given his history, I think it's a really difficult sell. And I think it's almost one of those things that I think if you did sign that player, and we were sort of joking a bit about the sort of anger the fans might have, would you really want to take that risk of destabilising the club there, that fan base connection with McKenna and with the players? I think that's really important if you're massively sort of punching above your weight in the Premier League, trying to stay up. You need the whole club, the whole town united behind the team, and I just think you wouldn't want to take that risk of doing something a bit maverick just for...
I do wonder whether Ipswich. I feel like Norwich fans would be annoyed about it, but would Ipswich?
They
I
might
don't
take it as a source of pride.
Yeah,
like
I
Norwich
do feel like
years ago. I don't know.
I'm trying to think how many derbies Buendia would have played in. I didn't look that up before, so that's a whole of my research.
Something like similar. Like, were Man United fans angry that Robin van Persie arrived at the club, or were they delighted that?
Well, you're right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Local's a bit different.
Yeah,
local is different. Local is different.
But then Man United fans, don't love him, but they were thankful for Michael Owen scoring goals at the Stretford end. For them, whereas Liverpool fans obviously didn't take that very well at all. Maybe it's the receiving team are the happier one.
At Carrow Road.
Also, I think if even if they were annoyed about him signing, I feel like Kieran McKenna is a big enough figure there, is well respected enough that if he can back up the signing with Buendia like being a star performer for them in the second half of the season and keeping them up, then I think they will forget about that instantly. I think
so as well as the scouting report, I also need some sort of poll or vox pop of local people.
I'll provide that. I can go on the train to Ipswich after this.
Yeah. Well, we'll do a quick one. Pete, don't criticise it too much, because you have not heard my suggestion, which is probably the wildest I've ever suggested on any show in my entire YouTube history of about 8 years. Right, buckle up, guys. Okay, so basically what has happened, what I think has happened with Ipswich so far this season is that actually their defence is pretty solid. Yeah. I think it's 28 goals conceded. You guys have seen one more fixture after we record this, but that's only 3 more than Brentford. But their attack, as Mikey pointed out, only 16 goals scored as we record this. Only Wolves and Everton have scored fewer, and that's not a great position to be in. You don't want to be rivaling Everton in terms of scoring charts for the last few years. So I went for the same position as Mikey, but this is a much bigger wild card than Buendia to Ipswich, which was already feeling a little bit crazy. Basically, Lyon are in huge financial issues. They are going to be relegated to Ligue 2 unless they sell a number of stars this January. They have debts which are rumoured to be over 500 million euros. Jean-Michel Aoula departed. Jean Textor came in, the guy that was linked with Everton, has got ties with Crystal Palace as well. It's been a financial train wreck, effectively, and they need a fast sale of talent in January. Now, one player who has completely exploded so far this season is Ryan Cherki, who is basically Eden Hazard regen with a bit of a worse attitude and
just
a little bit. And it's bizarre because he made his debut for Lyon at 16, and here he is, age 21, which is not old in football terms whatsoever. But it was felt that he was going to be like the poster boy of Liga for a while. Like, it was emerging around the same time that Mbappe was emerging at Monaco, and he's quite a bit younger than Mbappe, but he was kind of the next Mbappe, as it were. And it hasn't really totally worked out. He's on 22 goals and 32 assists in 158 games in all competitions. And his league starts have gone 21, 19 and 7. So he's never really been a crucial member of the side. But this year, 5 goals and 7 assists in 17 League and Europa League games. Now, from his perspective, do you want to swap Lyon for Ipswich? Absolutely not. Like, completely different calibre of team, completely different propositions for the season. But if Ipswich were to make a bid now, before the rest of Europe wakes up to this, and it's in Lyon's inbox on January the 1st, when they need this fire sale, and they offer them £30 million, would Lyon potentially be interested? Maybe in this fantasy world. The issue is now he's been linked with PSG. He's been linked actually with Liverpool, which I think is quite interesting. Maybe Liverpool are thinking about, we don't really know what's going to happen with Mo Salah in the future. Is he that future right winger? Is Dominic Szoboszlai pulling up any trees at the moment? Not particularly. Harvey Elliott's injured. Maybe they want another 10 alternative. And look, obviously, if you've got Liverpool or PSG on the table, you don't join Ipswich. But I think there has been a reason so far why, A, he hasn't played more at Lyon up until this season, and B, he hasn't got to move. Because whenever you watch this guy play, he can do absolutely everything on the football pitch, but he doesn't do it often enough, and he's never getting that big move. And we've seen Liga talents leave way before they're 21. So there must be something holding back the big clubs, which is what I want Ipswich to take advantage of in January. And look, maybe it's a short-term deal, or he moves there for £20 million. He impresses in 6 months and gets a much bigger move next summer. He was linked with Fulham in the summer, which I do think is maybe a sign that he's not outside of the realms of possibility for like a mid-table Premier League club, and that's not Ipswich. But you've got to punch above your weight if you want to stay up in this league. Like, they need a spark. He can play on the right, he can play on the left, he can play centrally. And I think he'd be most Premier League fans, most neutrals' favourite player from Ipswich from the rest of the season, and arguably one of their favourite players in the Premier League, like one of those kind of iconic cult heroes. He is that fun. Like, at the moment, he's completing 4 dribbles. His expected assists are at 0.5. That's like De Bruyne levels from previous years. He's playing exceptionally well. Does he want to go to Ipswich? Not necessarily, but maybe he won't have a call. Maybe Lyon don't have a decision, because they have to sell players this January.
Wow. What a cool! I mean,
that was a great pitch, by the way, Diggs.
Really?
That was an excellent pitch.
I think it's a bit crazy, but it's Christmas.
It is crazy. it is crazy, but you backed it up.
Yeah, I think you did back. I mean, it's tantalising to think,
between
isn't
the
it?
completely unrealistic, and very evocative.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Either way, there's going to be fireworks on the left wing, on the right wing. Sorry.
I think. Well, I think we sometimes underestimate, don't we, that pulling power of the Premier League as well. I mean, you said a few times there, would he want to go to Ipswich? But it's more, would he want to come and play in the Premier League? Which I think for most players not playing in the Premier League, the answer is yes, isn't it? So that's certainly on Ipswich's side. The financial stuff from Lyon, that sounds interesting. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many clubs are aware of this and onto it and making those offers earlier in January, as you said, for their best players, because that does sound like they're vulnerable to a few bids. And it always amazes me when you see the sort of budgets or the spending by clubs across Europe and how many Premier League clubs are sort of in the top 15 or the top 10. It seems like West Ham are always so high up.
Yeah.
And you just underestimate how much these Premier League clubs have got to spend and how much they spend compared to European teams. So even Ipswich, just this first season back in the Premier League, will have substantial sums, I guess, to go and to make a cheeky offer. But... what do you think about him, Mike?
So, Ryan Cherki?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a pipe dream. I think it would be a very difficult deal to pull off, I think. And also, he's also a difficult character as well. I think it would be a big task for Kieran McKenna to like, you know, get him integrated into that squad. You know, this is an Ipswich squad that has come up together from League One. Rayan Cherki made his Lyon debut in the Champions League semi-final against Bayern Munich. I mean, like this guy is like, you know, like he is a, you know, he was a superstar in the making. He is still only 21, but like going to Ipswich would be like a very humbling experience for him. It might be what he needs, Rayan Cherki. But I would say in terms of like culture, like Dier, I think, is more suited to like going to a team in a relegation dogfight in the Premier League.
He's like
he's
a
been
not
there
as
before.
crazy Ravel Morrison, but that kind of talent.
Okay. I mean, even with the comparison, you're just thinking, okay, if that's the player you're comparing him to for me. Oh, wow. Well, I hope that poll goes pretty well, Michael. I think my reputation and East Anglia
you might not ever be able to go to Portman Road again or Carrow Road.
I think I might.
Are we going with Buendia?
I think we're going to have to lean towards Buendia.
Okay,
I think that's
safe
fair
option.
enough. I think it was the right call as well, if I'm totally honest.
There was
to Ipswich. You heard it here first.
just before we move on, I had some other names that I went through before.
Oh, okay.
Before,
Let's listen to these.
Going on Buendia.
This is not becoming 2-1-3-1 by the way.
No. I'm just interested.
It's 1-1.
I am just interested to see, because I must admit I just didn't take into the East Anglia derby like enough when I was choosing Buendia, and I might have gone for someone else. So if I'd instead if I'd suggested Ben Doak, Anthony, or Miguel Almiron, would you have been more?
Oh, I'm a big Ben Doak
fan.
Big Ben Doak fan. Yeah,
I only didn't go for Ben Doak because I just thought it's just going to be impossible to get him out of Middlesbrough. Like, I don't know how you. Also, I just don't think Liverpool would be. I feel like Liverpool are more keen for him to be playing at Middlesbrough, where he's like producing loads and playing in a team which, you know, do dominate games.
Yeah, but I think you look at that performance against Croatia, against Guardiola, and you think, yeah, great, you're definitely progressing there. Now step it up. It's January, so have a half season at Middlesbrough, half season at Ipswich, and show that you're ready for the Premier League. And then let's see where you are in the summer, whether it's a integration into the Liverpool squad or if it's a Premier League loan, and that's sort of fast tracking his progress because I covered that game against Croatia and he was excellent. He was so good, and you're just like, wow, this player is going to be like a star. And it definitely gave Guardiola the heebie-jeebies, didn't it? The next couple of games after that is errors and errors afterwards. So hot to handle, Ben Doak. I'd
not
love to
on
see
the
him.
Anthony shout, if I'm totally
I
Anthony
didn't think so either. It's just I was just thinking of kind of right wingers who are kind of like uncertain futures, but yeah,
you get the point
there.
Anyway.
I get the point anyway. I was just interested to see.
I like Ben Doak as a shout. That's a good one.
Yeah.
It's more sensible than Ben Doak.
Much better shout.
Should we just put Ben Doak?
Yeah, let's put Ben Doak as the winner. Okay, let's move on to 19th place Wolves. Why don't I kick off here? They've conceded 40 goals in 16 games. They now have a new manager at the helm in Vitor Pereira, who is a journeyman to say the least. He's only lasted over 100 games in one club, which is Shanghai SIPG. He was nearly appointed Everton boss in 2013. They instead went for Roberto Martinez, but he's managed in Brazil, Greece, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, China. He really hasn't settled anywhere. So that's a fascinating appointment in and of itself. But yeah, Wolves, I think it's got to be a centre-back or it's got to be some sort of form of defender for them as well. Unfortunately for them as well, sorry to interrupt, unfortunately for them as well, only Chelsea and Spurs have more players out than them at the moment as well. That Mosquera out until June, Kaladzic, who I'd even forgotten was still there, out until January, although he's probably not going to play that much with Strand Larsen playing so well. And then João Gomez, Pablo Sarabia and Jose Sarr are kind of doubt, although they might have played at the weekend just gone. What were you going to say though, sorry Pete?
I was just saying, this was the big thing Gary O'Neill kept saying was you sold Max Kilman for £40 million and don't replace him, and then you have defensive issues and you wonder why. So you mentioned Sarr being out. They spent £10 million on Sam Johnson. Sarr was decent last season. I know he's not been fantastic. He's had dips this season, but was that the real point where you had to spend £10 million? Could you not have used some of that Kilman money and thought ahead? And I know money's quite tight at Wolves at the moment. I think that's the problem. After having so many seasons now in the Premier League and top half finishes under Nuno, it feels like they're regressing a bit now, and the money's not coming through as much as it was, and it does feel a team, a squad, club a little bit in a decline at the moment. I think that's the problem. But yeah, that Kilman sale really derailed them, I think.
It really did, for sure. I mean, Craig Dawson's now 34. As I said, Mosquera's out for the season. Toti Gomez, I think, is struggling this season so far. I think that's fair to say.
And Semedo's having to come into the back three at times, which is just not his position either.
Absolutely, and that loses a good weapon going forward as well in Semedo as well. So I'm suggesting a player on loan who was in the expanded squad for the Euros, didn't make the final 26, was it, in the end, but in Jarrell Quansah at Liverpool.
Yeah,
33 appearances last year, 17 in the league, started the first game of this season against Ipswich, and has barely been seen again.
Yep.
Van Dijk and Konate have been excellent. Look, Van Dijk and Konate have both had injury issues in the last few years, but generally they've stayed fit so far this season. They've still got Joe Gomez, who's played quite well when he's played so far this season. And the last time Quansah played was in that 3-3 draw against Newcastle, which is obviously doesn't look like it's going to derail the whole season, but it was when they looked least comfortable, really, defensively, and Newcastle kind of pressed them off the park, as they sometimes do against those bigger sides. But Jarrell Quansah was actually excellent last year. He won 70% of his tackles, he won 67% of his aerial duels. I think he would be interested in a loan move to Wolves. And actually, I don't think Liverpool would be totally against loaning him to Wolves either. There's only really an upside there. If not, he comes back to Liverpool. He's still on a long-term contract there. There's still the future that he is the future of their starting centre-backs. But he's got an opportunity to go get game time. Yes, it's a difficult situation, but there'll be certainly plenty of defending for him to improve his skills on. So a loan move for Jarrell Quansah, I thought, made a lot of sense.
Yeah, all over that one, Dougie. Sorry, Mikey, but yeah, I think that's. I've not even heard what you've got to say yet. But no, I think that's a great shout. So he came off at half time in that Ipswich game in the first weekend of the season, didn't he? And Konate came in, and it was Konate all the way from there. Brilliant partnership with Van Dijk. And then, as you say, when Konate went out, it was Gomez, not Quansah, coming back into the team. And I think it's interesting how different managers see a young player as well. Obviously, Klopp was behind Quansah. Quansah stepped up massively when Liverpool had those injury problems at the back last year. Really, really delivered really well for Klopp last year. But then a new manager comes in and maybe just sees a young defender who's still quite raw, He's still going to make mistakes, and it just isn't at the level of those those outstanding centre backs that they also have at the club. So player who needs game time. Wolves, good fit for him in terms of coming in terms of the way they play. Adds a bit of obviously height and strength to that team, but he can play with the ball as well.
He's a good all-round player.
He can bring it out. I think in a back three as well. If Pereira wants to continue with that system, I think Quansah pretty strong there.
Yep. Playing the wide channels
the wide channels either side, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. And Canate's back on Boxing Day as well, so it feels like that they could by January be like, yeah, he can go get some game time. Mike, it sounds like you're up against it.
I'm up against it. I am up against it, but I think I think I do have a pretty big hitter here for Wolves. Someone who's been linked with the likes of Inter, Borussia Dortmund. In fact, Brighton were quite close to signing him last summer as well. I've also gone for a centre-back, by the way. And yeah, someone who, as Dougie was saying, Tosi Gomez has struggled a bit this season. Someone who would be a clear upgrade on him on the left of a back three. Yeah. And also, if Vitor Pereira was to change to a back four, he'd be very suited to that as well, and can also play at left back if needs be as well. Would offer a long-term replacement to Ait-Nouri in that sense if they were to go to a back four. And that is PSV's Olivier Bashagli. Now, he was really keen, apparently, on the move to Brighton last summer. His contract is up this coming June. And so I think Brighton were keen to pay upwards of £25 million for him last summer, and PSV decided to dig their heels in and keep him at the club because he's so important to them as a ball-playing centre-back. So I feel like if Wolves were to get in there and be like, we will pay you a fee this January, otherwise you are just going to lose him next summer. It doesn't feel like there's going to be a new contract there. He's 27 years old now. I think he's pretty keen to make the step up to another league. I feel like PSV would strongly consider it. Now, from the player's perspective, he's in a title charge with PSV at the moment. They're top of the Eredivisie. He plays Champions League football, but he has already played Champions League football with PSV before. He's won the Eredivisie. He's won the KNVB Cup. He doesn't really have anything more to do there in terms of achievements. And yeah, he's not getting any younger, and a move to Wolves, if he was to impress there, maybe could lead to a move elsewhere. I think there are a number of clubs who would be in the market for a centre back, even though he's a centre back in his late 20s, like a really good ball playing centre back, someone whose skill set has been compared to Trent Alexander-Arnold's in the past, someone who can actually be really, really progressive with the ball. I think that's why Brighton were so keen on him. He would really add a lot to a team like that. As for Wolves, of course, a different kind of proposition, but his defensive numbers are still very strong. Physically, he is still, I think, capable of stepping up to the Premier League as a defender, but would also offer them that expansiveness, something that Quansah would offer as well, something that they've been missing without Kilman as well, that ability to play out from the back really, really effectively in order to, and also to hit teams in transition. He would be perfect for that. Imagine his kind of cross-field balls to someone like Mateus Cunha to chest down. I think he'd be really, really effective at. So yeah, I think Bashagli could be a really good option. Whether they've got the funds to be able to make a deal like that happen, and how much PSV would want to sell him for, is another matter, because they would still want upwards of £20 million. But if it's an option of £15 million and losing him in the summer for free, maybe PSV would be willing to take an offer.
Yeah, that contract situation is quite an interesting element to that idea, isn't it? Because, where Brighton go, follow. And that's quite a good tip, isn't it, in terms of looking to sign players from outside the Premier League in particular at bargain prices as well. I just wonder, as the player, we mentioned obviously going for the title in Holland and playing in the Champions League. You almost get to the point now where the players sort of hold that power, don't they? And it's like, if I get to the end of my contract, I can go and get this new contract with a new club, and all the money's coming to me. It's not that Wolves are paying PSV £15 million and then giving me money as well. They're paying me, and they've got this extra money they would have given to the club anyway, so I can have that as a signing on fee, or part of it as a signing on fee. So I think that's the difficult element with this one. I think is where a player is standing to win a trophy and playing big matches for his current club, which obviously he's pretty attached to, right? And then having to give that up to go into a relegation battle at Wolves. I think that might be a hard sell if he's seeing a payday in the summer for himself.
He would still get a significant wage rise, I assume, at Wolves. But yeah, you're right to bring that up. Another player who I was thinking about as well. It's not a last minute change, because I think this is between those two. But I just wanted to kind of mention as well, like Eric Dier was someone who I looked at last year as a potential loan to Luton, I think it was. And I don't think this will happen now, because he's very much needed at Bayern. But another player who's been out of the team this season, very much second choice, but with the Ito injury, I think is very much needed at Bayern. But someone of that profile as well, like someone who's got Premier League experience, can play in the middle of a back three, I think would have been great for Wolves as well. But it's just not possible to get Dier out of Brighton. And also even playing, even being a bench option at Bayern, I think for him, being with his best mate Harry Kane, living in Bavaria, I think it's a pretty sweet deal for him.
He's got a good life at the moment. Yeah. I mean, we mentioned Cody earlier in the show, didn't we? He's that sort of back three experienced Premier League specialist that you probably want to bring in. Obviously, neither of these players are that.
No,
but
if you have any suggestions for those, by the way, anyone obvious who would fit that role,
I've shown all our suggestions in the comments.
But as soon as you said Quansah, I was like,
you like the
sign on the dotted line.
To be fair, I think Bushagli is a really good shout. To be fair, I don't watch the Eredivisie on a weekly basis, but his numbers in the Champions League, obviously like the most intense, difficult competition in Europe, really, really pop. And I'd be amazed if he's not playing in the Premier League next season or a top club. But I just don't know whether it'll be Wolves. But fair enough. 2-1 to me. Okay, Mikey, you really need this one. Southampton to wrap up the show. Why don't you kick off?
Okay, cool. Southampton was such a difficult one.
Yeah.
Because 5 points as we record this, it really feels like they're fighting a losing battle. Obviously Russell Martin out of the door now, and remains to be seen what Southampton's playing style is going to be, long term between now and the end of the season. Leslie Ugochukwu looks like he's going to be on his way back to Chelsea. It looks like they're cancelling that loan. Maxwell Cornet's loan might well be cancelled as well. I mean, it's not, as we're recording this, then that's not set in stone, but it looks, I think David Ornstein was saying that that Ugochukwu's loan was likely to be cancelled. So already, those kind of players who you thought maybe they'll fill out the squad, or give them that option that keeps them in the Premier League. Those haven't worked out already. So it feels like Southampton's summer business has, it's not worked out. To cut a long story short, and they need upgrades all over the pitch. Really, I think in attack they certainly need upgrades, but I do think they really need to shore up defensively, and whether that was Russell Martin's style of play, whether that was lack of personnel, I think it's a bit of a mixture of the two. But certainly it feels like when Southampton are not in possession, that they do get overrun, and that's why I've gone for a real workhorse defensive midfielder. And again, I've looked to the continent here, because I just think it's going to be difficult to get a number 6 out of a Premier League club, or even out of a Championship club at this stage. How easy is it to attract someone from a Championship club who's going for promotion to a club that's almost certainly looking like they're going to get relegated at this point? Nevertheless, I've gone for someone quite punchy. And it's someone who was, who's been linked with Liverpool and Spurs in the past. Even, some journalists were suggesting him as a potential 6 or a potential Ugarte backup for Man United in the summer. And that's Morten Frendrup, who is at Genoa. Some people some of you may have heard of him, particularly last summer when his name was kind of popping up, being linked to those clubs. And so it feels like, going to Southampton, You know, it would be a no-brainer for him to just stay at Genoa. He's working under Patrick Vieira now there. But nevertheless, Genoa are in a bit of a relegation battle themselves. I think at the time of recording, they're only 2 points above the Serie A relegation zone. He's 23 years old. He's really cut his teeth there. He's been there for a few years now. And what makes him stand out is just that he is an absolute tackle machine. He makes 5 a game. I think he ranks 5th in Europe for total tackles and interceptions this season. He's always been like that. And just the energy that he would offer Southampton in midfield would be invaluable, I think, because Mateus Fernandes and Flynn Downs, you know, I think between them they make around 7 tackles and interceptions a game. I think if you got Friendrup in there, suddenly you would see Southampton breaking up play a lot more effectively, and to have someone with that kind of tenacity in midfield would be great. And as for Friendrup, I think if he was to come into Southampton and really impress in you know, a struggling team, then I think that would open him up potentially to have bigger Premier League sides come in for him in the summer for big money. And again, for Southampton, that would be really, really interesting if they were to, you know, stump up 20 million for him at this moment in time. You know, you never know, that could turn into 45 million come the summer if he was to impress. Now, the other areas of his game, the kind of passing elements aren't as strong, and that's where maybe the bigger clubs have had their reservations before. But if he could come into a Southampton team which is a bit more possession based, and you know, see those sides of his game get a bit of an uptick, start to improve in those areas, then maybe like a mid-table or above mid-table team would consider him.
Yeah, I think it's a good shout. I think I like it. And Russell Martin's style was so distinctive. Obviously going to move away from that.
They are Danish owned though, Southampton.
Ooh.
So, you
okay.
Rasmus
There's a
Ankersen,
connection,
former Brentford and Midtjylland, you know, I'm sure he would have been tracking Morten Friendrup's progress over the last few years. Not that he completely calls the shots there, but he will certainly be across their transfer business.
Yeah, no, good connection, that one as well. I think the obvious thing you see when Southampton are playing, it's those errors at the back, isn't it, the passing out. I thought you were going to say a goalkeeper, a new goalkeeper, because I think that should be high on their shopping list as well. But
I feel like with Ramsdale there now, though, it's just like they spent so much money on him in the summer. Right. It feels unrealistic.
They're going to stick
to
with him, aren't
again.
they? Yeah, I think it's good, and I think they're a team that, you know, have obviously got technical quality players in that squad. You know, you can't play that way through the Championship season without having that, and we've seen flashes of it, haven't we? Not many flashes, but we've seen a few flashes of that good football from them as well. But yeah, I think you're right. Someone who can add a bit of tenacity, a bit of bite, a bit of edge to this team, because it's all a bit soft, isn't it? I think sometimes from Southampton. And maybe the mistakes have just shattered that confidence and damaged that belief in themselves. But yeah, you can imagine that someone coming in like a terrier, running around, winning that ball back quickly and giving, you know, then you get to that situation with these pass masters. It's like, well, look, if you lose the ball, it's fine. I'll go and get it back for you quickly, and then we can try again. And then you start maybe trying a few different things and start building that confidence up again. So, yeah, good shout, I think, Mikey.
Fair enough. He could have a chat with Patrick Vieira, his current manager, and say, should I go there? And I think he'd say no. But he could have a chat with him and talk about bite in midfield. Imagine Patrick Vieira at Southampton right now. That'd be amazing. But yeah, Southampton on track for 11 points. So you're kind of thinking, are you just preparing for the Championship? Are you going to sign someone on loan? Do you even bother spending 20-30 million pounds on a Friendrup, who is a great suggestion, but do they have that sort of cash? Look, I think that goals are going to save them, if anything, really, because they haven't scored nearly enough. You know, they've scored the fewest goals in the division. They've also conceded the second most, so I totally see why you'd go with a different strategy. But I do wonder whether just simply changing tactics will help shore them up at the back, whereas I do think they are quite short of quality in the forward areas. There is a striker down the south coast at Brighton not getting any game time in Evan Ferguson. He might be available on loan. And I know what you're thinking. Do Brighton loan a player to Southampton? Well, Brighton and Southampton, actually, interestingly, aren't considered big rivals. Southampton's biggest rival is Portsmouth. Yeah. I think Bournemouth's biggest rival is Southampton. And Palace are Brighton's biggest rival. So I don't actually think they'd care loaning a player to Southampton, who are...
It's not like Dier going to Ipswich.
Well, exactly. It's nothing as crazy as that.
And Dier is going to Ipswich. As things stand, so.
I mean, there's 11 places between the sides. They're not competing for the same achievement this season. And look, Evan Ferguson this season ranks 20th for league minutes in Brighton's squad. He is behind Welbeck. He is behind João Pedro. He's also behind Ruta. There's just actually no need for him this season. And given the fact that he's coming back from a fairly serious injury and a really poor run of form, I think it's 1 goal in his last 27 league games now for Brighton, which completely goes under the radar, given how promising he was in the season before last, where I think it was 6 league goals in just a handful of games, and scored that, I think it was a hat-trick against Newcastle, and became one of the youngest players to score a hat-trick in the Premier League. Everyone got super excited. We're making videos left, right, centre about £100 million moves to Chelsea, and obviously it just hasn't really worked out. And Danny Welbeck is a top Premier League striker. João Pedro, we were talking about him potentially going to Arsenal last week. He feels like he's got a huge future ahead of him. They signed Ruta for £40 million from Leeds. It doesn't scream to me that they're really going to use Evan Ferguson for the rest of the season. So you might as well loan him to Southampton. Say he scores 5 goals before the end of the season. He's happier. He's in a better place to improve you next year. His value goes up if you want to sell him in the summer. I just think it's a bit of a tap-in. And he does need something to turn around for him because, his shots have collapsed from 3.4 in the season that he was really firing to just 2.4 this season. He's now just getting 33% of his shots on target. At his peak, that was at 47%. So everything is not really working for him. Just 1 goal so far this season in very limited minutes. It's time for a loan move. And Herzler said a few weeks ago, I don't really want him to go out on loan. But is that the sort of thing that you say publicly when you're kind of protecting an asset for the future and trying to make sure that he feels important to Brighton for his mentality with still, I think it was in early December that he said that, so there was still a month to go till January. And if he'd said, he can go in January, what does that do to the poor guy's morale? So I think there might be a loan move to happen with Evan Ferguson to Southampton.
Yeah, he definitely needs to go and play football somewhere, doesn't he? And it's a bit mystifying really how he has just dropped off from all that potential and excitement that he had when he first came on the scene. But when you see him play, I think there is, still a player there. And I think, with strikers, it is just the way that you just need games, don't you? You need to take those opportunities. And then once you get those goals, start going on a run and start building something up. And presumably if he's going to Southampton, then he could probably stay where he's already staying and commuting.
Just
and
get the tram.
Yeah.
If there's a tram.
And...
We're getting turned to travel.
I think there is a like a railway that goes along the south coast. I think trams maybe ended in the 1960s, but
trams maybe a bit too continental.
I think it's. I think that's probably quite a good shout actually. But it's just about what Southampton really need. And if this is the team already thinking about going back down, Armstrong's probably going to score goals for them next year. I would have thought. So are you pitching a loan to me or
It was a loan
transfer?
actually. Yeah, it was a loan.
Yeah. See, it's probably a loan that could. Well, it's one of those things that it could give you a spark and lift you up if he hits the ground running. But if he doesn't, he just, with the way that he's been scoring, if that 1 in 27 form continues, he just becomes another player in that group that are struggling. Whereas I think that Mikey, your suggestion might just add a bit more bite and a bit of fight to this Southampton team.
I must admit, Frendrup would not. I don't think would be keen to then go down to the Championship. I feel like he would.
So he needs to perform for 6 months.
I feel like that because it feels almost like like Serie A is a super competitive league, and I don't think you leave it actually that even for, just because it's the Premier League. I don't think you just leave Serie A for the sake of it.
Especially for a team on 5 points.
Yeah, for sure. So I think Frendrup would have eyes on, then getting his next step up. It's like kind of stepping stone. Put yourself in the Premier League shop window, or put yourself in the shop window for kind of Europa League, Champions League level clubs, and then go from there. But I'll take it.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
Yeah.
There
You
we
got
have
any,
it.
any backup options that are going to blow everyone else out the water?
I'm not sure whether I did have any backup options.
When you said, going from Serie A to the Premier League and kind of struggling, I'm not trying to change your mind now, but Remo Freuler was amazing at Atalanta and then was pretty poor, I think it's fair to say, at Nottingham Forest, and he was going from a club of Atalanta's stature. I'm not saying, but Frendrup's also at a very different stage of his career. He's got more energy about him, and also Nottingham Forest, their team was changing on like a pretty much a daily basis.
He was entering a kind of
it was like
complete
pure
mishmash.
chaos in that couple of years, wasn't it? But yeah, anyway, worth considering. But guys, more importantly, we want to hear your suggestions. What do you think of ours? Do you think they were a little too crazy at points? Maybe, but it's Christmas, you know? And what are your suggestions for each of these 4 clubs? What do you think of those loan deals we suggested? And a huge thanks to Mr. Sporting Director Pete Smith once again.
Oh, too kind. Thank you.
He was brilliant. A very good sporting director as ever. I think it should be a permanent role within Sky. I don't know where you can use these skills better. But yes, go check out all of Pete's work on social media and as Sky Sports' senior football journalist. Massive thanks from me and Mikey for supporting the Lowdown so far this season. Real accomplishment treat to have Jamie Carragher on last week as well. That was sensational.
Oh yeah, another thing as well, like if you have been watching us this season and you are enjoying the videos, please do remember to leave it a little like at the bottom, because that's really helpful.
Absolutely. And yeah, leave a like, leave a comment, and we'll catch you in 2025. It's going to be one hell of a year. We can't wait. Have a great Christmas. Bye bye.